Here's Archie's Travels Chapter 7, entitled Cold Splash. The splash alerted Jack, and he threw down his stick in anger. Archie rose to the surface, splashing and gasping, and all that he could think of was the eel and how much he wanted to get to dry land. He'd never swam before, but it came naturally to him, and he kicked his legs furiously. His master was shouting at him, but with the bubbling water in his ears, it was impossible to hear what he was saying. But he knew that it wasn't going to be pleasant. It was hard going as the current was so strong, but Archie was determined to get to the other side. He didn't think that weird creatures were swimming beneath him, as he was very squeamish. Eventually, he scrambled up the muddy bank to safety, and when he did, he shook the cold water from himself. This was a big mistake. All of the cold, dirty water drenched his master, who was furious, and he picked up his walking stick and it whirled through the air and came down on the centre of poor Archie's back. Archie cried out, but it didn't stop the blows from raining down, one after another. He felt the cold, wet river of blood running down his back, and the sting of the stick as if he had been stung by 100 bees. It brought back sad, horrible memories, and once again Archie's eyes filled with tears. The beating only stopped when Jack broke his stick. Look what you made me do, he spat at Archie, and he gave him one final kick for pleasure. Archie winced, but he was determined not to shout out in pain. The last thing that he wanted to do was to give him that satisfaction. But he knew that in the future he would have to be careful. The only consolation was that his paws were spared, and once again they both set off, with Jack whistling away as if nothing had happened. Archie winced as he walked, and he felt the blood running down his back and onto the leaves. Now he knew what kind of man Jack was, and he knew that one day he would have to escape, but he didn't know how and he didn't know when. He had to take one day at a time and hope that he could survive. Hurry, shouted Jack as he ploughed through the wood. He'd thrown his walking stick away in anger, and now he had an even bigger one, and Archie eyed it worryingly. The last thing he wanted was more pain, and they walked for half an hour through the woods, and Archie's spirits slowly began to lift as his pain subsided. Suddenly, in a clearing, something golden brown caught his eye. Then it turned, and Archie saw its beautiful eyes and face. It looked so graceful and elegant that it looked like it didn't belong in the forest. Dear, Jack whispered, and he crouched down silently, and then he raised his rifle. Archie hoped with all of his heart that he would miss, but he didn't. With one last innocent look at Archie, the deer fell and crumpled to the forest floor. Jack raised his gun in the air in triumph and he stalked over. He stood over the deer and watched its poor heart beating, and to Archie's horror he raised his gun again, but thankfully the deer's heart fell silent before he could fire another shot. It was a small mercy. Tears filled Archie's poor eyes. He couldn't believe that someone could be so cruel to such a beautiful creature.